Okay, hey y'all. Thank you so much for coming today. I'm really excited to get to know you better. I'm just going to start by introducing myself. I'm a fourth year student at San Francisco State. I'm studying creative writing, comparative and world literature, Jewish studies, and Africana studies. And I'm the student president at San Francisco Hillel. I use she, her, and they, them pronouns. So on my screen, Danielle is first. Would you mind introducing yourself next?
Sure. My name's Danielle Nadelson. I use she, her pronouns. I'm the director of the Springboard Fellowship at Hillel International, which is the largest early career development program in the Jewish community. And I used to work on campus at UCLA, it's Hillel. And I'm really honored to be here. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Thank you. Manny?
Hi there. My name is Manny Akutiel. I'm a small business owner. In San Francisco. I own a political events and gathering space called Manny's that has its own nonprofit restaurant, bookshop, and coffee shop. I'm also on the board of the Jewish Community Center of San Francisco and the San Francisco Municipal Transportation Agency, SFMTA.
Awesome, thank you. And I love Manny's. I really miss that about San Francisco. Last but not least, Sheila.
Great, thanks Ocean. It's so good to be here with Manny and Danielle. Hi everyone, I'm Sheila Katz. I'm the CEO of the National Council of Jewish Women based in Washington, DC, but we have sections all over the country, including in San Francisco. We're a grassroots organization of 180,000 activists working to improve the lives of women, children, and families. And I'm super excited to be here today because in my past life, I was the Vice President of Student Engagement and Leadership at Hillel International and worked for Hillel for over a decade. So it's really wonderful to be here, and Ocean, to have you facilitate this conversation today.
Awesome, thank you. And Sheila, if I can ask you first, can I know a little more about your personal Jewish story and the work you're doing today, and how do your Jewish values play a role in your work?
Sure, well, I realized I forgot to say my pronouns, which are she, her. I know they're written on the screen probably. You know, I didn't set out to be a Jewish professional in any way, shape, or form, but I've always been guided by Jewish values. And so in many ways, this profession found me. And I was involved in NIFTY, the Reform Youth Group, growing up. And, you know, going through a lot, my family's been through a lot of ups and downs. My mom has multiple sclerosis, and when it came out of remission, we needed a lot of help from the community, and it was really the Jewish community who showed up for us, and that's what got me even more connected and kind of inspired to think about the impact we could make. And so that led me eventually to be a teacher, actually, and then to work for Hillel, and then all the way now at National Council of Jewish Women. So I feel really lucky to have been inspired by the Jewish community, and now to get to be in a position to really use my values on this national stage to figure out how to make things more equitable for everyone.
Thank you for sharing. That's moving. Danielle, your work and your personal Jewish values, how do they come together?
Yeah, in many ways, I grew up with clarity around the fact that I wanted to be a Jewish communal professional. I grew up in very involved Jewish communities. That saying, "it takes a village to raise a child," really feels like it was written with me in mind. There are a number of villages that really helped me create a sense of self and a sense of who I was as a communal leader. And really the power of relationships has been a theme that's run throughout my life, and that makes it really fulfilling for me to be doing work in the context of Hillel. So Hillel was really the first Jewish context for me that showcased leadership in a more diverse and accessible way. It showcased that leadership was not about how much you knew or how involved you were, but really how you bring the skills and talents and passions that you have to develop something bigger than yourself. And that's what community was really about. It wasn't about a collection of like-minded people all coming together. It was a constellation of robust and diverse people who cared about a lot of different things, but felt a sense of connection to something bigger than themselves. So my involvement on campus at Hillel is really what led me to be a campus professional. And I have always felt really empowered and invested in, and I wanted to pay that forward. And Hillel was a perfect place for me to do that as a professional. And I got the opportunity through Hillel as a professional to participate in a pilot early career development program. At the time, it was called the Ezra Fellowship. It then became a track of the program I now get the opportunity to lead. And really at the core, I see Jewish leadership as a space to empower and invest in people, to craft and take ownership of their Jewish identities, and to co-create spaces for others to thrive in. So I'm really honored to have sort of come full circle and to be investing and empowering in the leadership of others so that we can create communities that are equitable and representative of the communities that we serve.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you. And Manny, how about you?
My Jewish journey?
Yes. And how it connects to your work.
I know we only have like 30, 45 minutes left. That could take the rest. I'm sure for all of us, the Jewish journey is complicated and still happening. I grew up in a modern Orthodox household. My father was an Orthodox rabbi from Afghanistan in Los Angeles. And I left the yeshiva when I was 14 and went to a non-Jewish high school. And that was kind of a crossroads moment for me because I wasn't being forced or, pressured to continue to live in the Jewish way that I was before, but I actually found that my faith kept me very grounded and it's very meaningful to me. And so I find myself in many worlds, and that does certainly inform my work as a convener of politics, convener of civic conversation. I am a religious Jew who's very much a homosexual, who's very much a progressive Democrat, who is working in the mission, living in the Castro, and so it all kind of swims within me. And I have learned, having a conservative, religious Jewish family to this day, the importance of not discounting people because they have vastly different worldviews that you do, how to build bridges, and how to bring people together, and the importance of nuanced, in-person, dedicated conversation. And so I feel lucky to have the Jewish upbringing that I do. I love my faith, I love my people, and I love my practice.
Thank you. Thank you. That's really beautiful as well. Our next question is, tell us about a challenge you've had to overcome in your work. How do you think the Jewish community can support emerging leaders as they navigate similar issues? Does anyone want to start with that one? Okay, Danielle, would you mind starting from me?
Somehow I knew that was coming my way and I could see it in Sheila's eyes, but I just was like, no, maybe someone else will take a stab. No, I'm kidding. I think in many ways, I think the opportunity to navigate challenges in our work lives and in our personal lives is what's defined many of our leadership. So I just want to start by saying, I think that challenge in our sector and in our world is a productive thing. I think sometimes the frame of challenge can feel like it's negative, and I think there's a lot of opportunity in the challenges that are presented. Where I see it showing up most, and what I feel like I've navigated most, is this notion of binary thinking, that a lot of things exist in this either or black and white category, and that falls short of making room for the nuance and the spectrum that's really playing out. So, right, like the idea that we're pitting tradition against innovation, when in reality, we're trying to create emergent and creative Jewish life. Right? It's not about either or, it's actually about both and. And when we live into that, great things happen. And when we fall into a trap of the binary, I find it to be, at best, just reductive, but at worst, actually really, really uninviting. And not true to the core of what we're trying to accomplish in the world. I think, and Manny spoke to this a little bit, like there's a full spectrum of connection to identity, to lots of different facets of Jewish life and other identities that matter to us. And when we live into seeing the world that way, it is helpful and beautiful. And when we don't, and we reduce to labels of pro and anti this or that, it reduces sort of this nuance that's part of our community's fabric. And I think that can be really challenging. And connected, I think when we fall short of seeing the people in our community as intersectional beings who have multiple identities, all of those identities inform each other's identities, we reduce the possibility of engaging folks in meaningful and holistic ways, right? Jewish identity is refracted through a lot of other lenses of identity. And when we miss the opportunity to address that, I think we fall short of creating really meaningful and nourishing communities. So those are the core challenges that I think we're facing as a community, that I certainly am facing in my leadership. And yeah, and I think they're the right ones for us to be grappling with.
I cannot agree with you more, Danielle. Thank you. Manny, do you have similar challenges, or do you have different ones in your work?
I think my challenges in my work that I've had to overcome, I do think that people have discomfort with vocal, proud Jews in politics. Certainly in progressive politics and in all politics. And I think not everyone has that problem, but there are people that do have that problem. They would never say it. I do think people in America are still, and in general, are uncomfortable with people who step forward with their Judaism and are proud of it and talk about it, show it, and it is, I don't really see it as a challenge, but as kind of a opportunity. I know that sounds like a cop-out, but it's true. It's also like my gayness, like there was a time not that long ago where you couldn't, just being on public board, I'm the only LGBT person on the SFMTA board. I'm out there in the community, I'm working on things, and I'm very, out with my identity. And so these are opportunities to be proud of ourselves and be unafraid. And to call, I hate the word call out, but, and to just call attention to when people are saying things like, you don't belong here, or get out of here, or this isn't for you, why are they saying it? What is it about you that they feel like is not in the right place? And as we know from the history of our people, folks have been saying that about Jews for thousands of years. And so I don't think my struggle is any different than the struggle that we've all been passed down to. And I think every generation of Jewish leaders, and certainly the three of you are Jewish leaders along with me, this is our burden to bear. And we have to look back on our lives and be proud of the way we represented ourselves, I think. Yeah, in a way that's like menschy and moral and kind and filled with tikkun olam.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. You highlight some unfortunate truth, but also a lot of hope and a lot of values that we should be leaning towards in the future. Sheila, do you resonate with these challenges? Do you have different ones? And do you lean on the Jewish community to work through these challenges?
Yeah, +1 to what's been said for sure. I think it's really interesting to hear both of you, because in many ways I feel like what I was going to share feels like a combination of both. And so if I just stay in a personal lane, I'll just say, well, I'm very aware that things are better for women now than they were 100 years ago. And I always want to do my part to celebrate that it is better than it has ever been. And there is so much more progress than ever before. We still have to understand that women are not paid fairly in any workforce in this country, including Jewish organizations. Women are less likely to be promoted, right? In the Jewish world, there are 2 women CEOs of major Jewish organizations, and all the other women CEOs are CEOs of women's organizations. And we need to think about that when not only are we the majority of the population, but we make up more than 80% of the Jewish professional world. So we are seeing a landscape that is filled with women that is still not promoting women to the top level, not paying us fairly, not giving us comprehensive benefits and the things we need to be able to stay in the workforce. and still grappling with issues of harassment and assault and other things that have always historically been in every workplace in this country. So we're in the best place we've ever been ever before in this country, and we have a long, long way to go. And, you know, I'd be remiss after everything we've seen recently in the news, particularly around racial justice, to not name that it is way worse for women of color than it is for white women. And I do believe one of the reasons I've been able to advance so quickly in the Jewish world is partially because of my whiteness. And but the specific barrier I want to name that I think is relevant in the context of Hillel and the conversation today that I've at least experienced is that even in progressive spaces, and even with students who I think are like leading the charge for inclusion and diversity, I'm not always immediately seen as somebody that they perceive as someone who exercises leadership. And the best example I have is when I was a vice president at Hillel, I went with one of my colleagues who was also a vice president who happened to be a man with gray hair, and our CEO who also happened to be a man with gray hair, to a teen event in which they were bringing in prominent leaders to engage with them. And I kid you not, we walked in and a line formed in front of the CEO and a line formed in front of the other vice president, and everybody assumed I must be there to support them. Teens who like really believe and understand diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so there's a lot of unlearning to do that we all have to do of every generation to begin to see people who look like all of us on this panel as the people who are the rightful leaders of organizations, and not, by the way, up and coming leaders, which drives me nuts. There were a million articles when I became CEO of NCJW, and they're like, up and coming. And I was like, what do you mean up and coming? I have arrived. And men my age are running for president, Pete Buttigieg, and nobody's calling him up and coming. And so I think we have to really look at the way that we have constantly accepted who has been allowed to speak on behalf of Jews. And the biggest challenge that we're going to have to overcome, which is going to require people with power to give up their power, is to make space for the people who actually represent the full diversity of the Jewish world. And that is what inspires me the most about Hillel, because you have them, particularly in San Francisco, on your campuses. And I'm excited about the potential of all of those students running Jewish organizations and being actually seen as people with potential and the skills to be able to see through really the future of the Jewish world. And so those are some of the things that come to mind that I think actually combines a little bit of what you both said.
It sure did. And it's actually the perfect segue to the next thing we're going to talk about, which is what are you seeing from your peers and young Jewish adults today that inspires you? And Sheila, you sort of started with that. So do you want to finish that thought?
Well, I'm always happy to say what I'm seeing from my peers, and particularly young Jewish adults today, because like, I'm excited. What gives me the most hope in this very broken world, very, very, very broken, as we have continued to see, is Generation Z. And some of our youngest people. And I think what makes me feel so excited about all of them is just the real deep belief that we are worthy and we are holy as our complex selves, and that every single piece of our identity ought to be brought to the table and celebrated, and that all of the problems in this country that is a threat to anyone's identities, whether it's anti-trans sports legislation, laws that threaten our reproductive rights, the No Ban Act that actually passed today, reversing the Muslim ban, and especially now the true fight for racial justice, calling out systems that kill our beloved Black community members. This is a generation that is saying, not on our watch, and it's not okay. Time's up. And I'm deeply inspired by the lack of compromise, if you will, to be able to say that we all matter and that we all deserve equity, respect, and safety, particularly our BIPOC and Black community right now. And so I could go on and on and on, but those are some of the things that just give me a lot of hope and make me want to invest more and give more leadership opportunities and growth opportunities for the youngest of our generations in this country.
Absolutely. Danielle, who inspires you?
Yeah, I mean, part of the desire to come back to this movement and have an impact on it again is because, to Sheila's point, right, the generation that we're seeing on campus, not just in our students, but also in our professional workplace, are folks who are bringing risk-taking and conviction to their work. They're bringing intersectional and holistic senses of self, right? They're bringing their whole selves to work in meaningful and relevant ways. They're asking tough questions and pushing for conversations to move towards action in a really compelling and meaningful way. And I think contrary to the fear and narrative that we've sometimes perpetuated in the Jewish world, these folks are interested and looking to make meaning out of Judaism in their lives, right? They're looking to add wisdom and value from a Jewish wellspring explicitly and authentically into their sense of who they are in the world, right? And I think we've long worried that maybe that wouldn't be the case. And I think what we're seeing is dafka the opposite, like all the more so folks are looking to Jewish tradition, Jewish wisdom, Jewish ideals to be inspiring, insightful, resonant, and informing of their directions and how they want to live their lives. And Hillel is one of the best places to move folks from spark to flame, to say, great, we love that that's something you're interested in. Let's help you bolster that. Let's fan that flame of engagement a little bit deeper and make sure that by the time you leave here, you are able to claim and own your sense of Jewish identity in an authentic and meaningful way that's not secondary to other identities, that's not on the side or only on Shabbat and holidays, but is actually a central and integrated part of how you see yourself in the world. And that's an incredibly powerful thing, and something that I think gives us a lot of hope, right? I think the future is bright when we're seeing that conviction, even through a pandemic, that people want to engage in yet another online Zoom program because there's something relevant and meaningful and compelling there. I think is such an inspiring note to see, and I think the future is bright.
I agree. Thank you. Manny, what's on your mind?
Well, I think Sheila and Danielle said most of it, both of them so deeply and frighteningly articulate and brilliant. But I guess the only thing I would add is just, I think I grew up in a time where Jews, the American Jewish community, was really nervous about whether our generation was going to totally leave our Judaism at the door. Combination of fears around intermarriage, assimilation, and folks just not going to synagogue. And I have to say, I'm 31 years old now, so I hope to think that I'm still in my youth for a couple more years. But I'm really excited about how younger Jews and Jews into their middle ages are weaving their Judaism into their lives in a way that feel authentic and that they're proud of. I'm like thinking about Milk and Honey at Burning Man and this like enormous Shabbat that happens with thousands of people. And in San Francisco here, like all the ways that Judaism moves into people's spiritual practice. And it just, I feel reassured that Judaism is here and people, the young generation is finding ways to keep the fire burning. I think, Danielle, you said that, you made a fire analogy. And yeah, I'm not worried about it. Like, I don't know about other religions, but I feel like Judaism, like the fire is burning strong and we're doing it in a way that feels right? We're not like being forced to like all sit in like the synagogue pews and like read from the Machzor. We're like, but we're still doing it in a way that feels exciting to us. I see a lot of young Jews excited about what Judaism means to them. So that is cool, and I'm into it.
Ocean, can I add something?
Yeah, go.
You go first, Danielle.
No, you, please, Sheila, you.
Maybe we're going to say the same thing. You never know with us. Yes, the Jewish future is bright. That is for sure. And I think, Manny, what you were just hitting on is it just doesn't look the same as it did a few decades ago. And I think that's totally okay and actually a sign of success. And I'll share just a short analogy that I used to give when I was running student engagement at Hillel. And Danielle, hopefully you can relate, probably Ocean, and I'm sure Rachel and Emily from San Francisco Hillel. But when you are a Hillel professional, you are an expert like coffee drinker, because all you do is take students to coffee and learn their stories. And so I think I can safely say I've taken at least 1,000 college students to coffee at some point in my life, and many board members and lay leaders as well. And I have to tell you, never, this is true, in my experience taking a student to Starbucks, did they ever order a black coffee. But most of the lay leaders that I did absolutely did. And I actually think this is a great analogy, because younger people and generations crave nuance and customization. And businesses understand this, right? It was an intentional decision for Starbucks to add names on cups, not for efficiency, but for personalization, and to have a secret menu, which by the way they do, and to begin to offer more and more options around milk and other things. They didn't say, oh, those young people and their coconut milk. They said, oh, young people are going to come in our store if we add coconut milk. Let's do it. And I see the same thing as adjustments that we have to make, particularly in the Israel space. Young people don't like the term pro-Israel or anti-Israel. It's like ordering a black coffee. They want nuance. They want to talk about their relationship to Israel in context of the occupation or settlements. They want to use a customized way to talk about a really complicated issue, which goes back to Danielle talking about nuance overall. And I think if a company like Starbucks can figure out a way to engage young people, then the Jewish community as a whole has to start looking at this real customization as a sign that we are doing exactly what we need to do to continue to engage a younger generation. And for those folks watching right now who like their black coffees or like it a different way, that's totally cool. We can exist in the same space with a slightly different way that we engage. And so I think that that's like an exciting opportunity. And I hope folks who are lay leaders or donors of San Francisco Hillel, hopefully you already do this because you're engaged with San Francisco Hillel, but you see what they're doing as actually truly intentional, strategic, and innovative as a way to engage and cultivate this new generation of Jewish leaders. Danielle, were you going to say the same thing or something similar?
Yeah, I was going to say that, while it looks different, it's kind of just a remix of the same, i.e., like the actual bedrock of Jewish tradition is that of adaptation across context and over time. That's why we've endured as long as we have. That's why we've been able to outlast every other ancient civilization out there, is because a central ingredient of our DNA is that of adaptability and change over time, right? That's actually the only constant in a lot of ways. And so, like, to your point about the coffee pieces, it's still coffee, right? They're still drawn to the same authentic wellspring that previous generations were drawn to. They're just drawn from it a little bit differently. And P.S., the same way that I think that there are folks who drink from Starbucks and also go to a local, hometown coffee house, the same is happening in our Jewish worlds. People in our generation and in Gen Z are finding connection to smaller, niche, identity-based Jewish experiences. And they're also still showing up to Hillel and showing up to synagogues and showing up to other longstanding institutional spaces when those institutional spaces have added coconut milk, right? When those institutional spaces have recognized and adapted to the people that they're trying to meet and reach so that all of them is seen, right? Something I was going to share about myself earlier is that, like, I've always been counted. Right? From the very beginning of my Jewish life, I have always been seen and celebrated and lifted up into leadership opportunities. But it wasn't until recently that all of me, all parts of my identity were seen and nurtured at the table. As a Jew of color, my leadership, I didn't even have that language until 6-7 years ago. Right? When I was on campus, it wasn't a conversation that we were having. There weren't role models that looked like me. And the fact that there are student leaders and campus professionals and Jewish professionals who look like me, who have an identity like mine, who have multiple senses of who they are in the world and it's being spoken to, that means that more folks like me are going to be able to show up. It means that I won't be an anomaly in the future. It means I won't have to be the one who blazes my own trail, because there will be others who have done that alongside me. And so I think, to SF Hillel's credit, this is work they've been doing for a while now, right? They're ahead of the curve in a lot of ways. And to be invested in SF Hillel means to be invested in the future sustainability of a holistic and well-rounded approach to nurturing Jewish communal life.
Thank you, Danielle. I love this coffee analogy. It's really funny. I just have to say quickly, recently a Dunkin' Donuts opened up in my neighborhood, and we're all really excited about it. And my mom comes home with a black coffee. And I was like, what? Like, I'm not going to spend money unless it's a lavender latte. They even have a coffee after a TikTok star. Like, she made her own coffee. Anyway, it's funny. It's so true about Gen Z. The last thing, speaking of Gen Z, that we're going to talk about together is about our Jewish future. So for our next generation, why is it important to invest in young Jewish adults, whether that's through SF Hillel or just young Jewish adults in general? Does someone want to start with that one? That's fine. Oh, you got it, Manny?
Well, no, I'll let someone else go first.
No, please, go ahead.
Well, I mean, I just think, I guess I was just going to say is I don't really think we have much of a choice. I mean, that's, I think it's all of our responsibility to do it. It is definitely that the Lador Vador is, something that we all are brought up with, no matter how Jewish we are. I mean, the act of a Passover Seder, I think, is just such an amazing ritual of reminding us of the importance of passing down our stories, our legacy, and our lessons. And I just want, which kind of piggybacking off what Sheila was saying earlier about how impressed we all are on the Gen Z's embrace of intersectionality, activism, and the fights of our generation and our time. I think Jews have a big role to play in all the movements that we're currently seeing in our world: climate change, racial justice, fights against poverty, economic inequality, women's rights. We're in a major period of tumult in our society, and an historic faith that has underpinnings in social change as we do has a role to play. We've always had a role to play in social change. And so I think it's especially important now that the next generation of Jews, we're part of this movement, and that we imbue in them the lessons that were imbued in us. And that's what I have to say.
I'm happy to go next. I mean, why wouldn't you want to invest in San Francisco Hillel? First, I have to just give a nod to their executive director, Rachel, who I just think is really one of the best in the country, if not the best, innovative and empathic, and really cares about the students. And, I would just, wherever she is, I would just give money there. But if that's not enough, I would say, at NCJW, our whole work, and what our advocates know, many of whom I know are here, is that we have to create a more just and perfect world. And what we see on the college campus time and time again is actually one of the first moments in people's lives where they are around the greatest diversity that they will ever be around. And it becomes a bit of a microcosm of things happening in the outside community, and a bit of a crockpot for the issues that arise in our greater community. And it is a time where people get to decide who they want to be. And it is a time where they get to make some of the mistakes that they need to make to figure out who they are going to become. And so I just think this is the training ground for identity, for people to think about who they are. It's sometimes the first time where people are thinking about who they are without the context of their parents, and maybe challenging identities. It's where we see still the majority of people coming out in their experience. Having an experience like this and being around great diversity allows for so much learning and unlearning to happen. And I always feel deeply, deeply inspired by seeing people on their journey. I know they're supposed to be there to learn and have a major, but I think it's what happens outside of the classroom that's truly important. And when you have an organization like San Francisco Hillel, particularly with the leadership of San Francisco Hillel, who cares so deeply about the success of each person on the campus, then it just feels like it's a win-win all around to invest in these great people and in the work they're doing to create great humans who are going to be good people in this world. And you know, Ocean, I know you're already there, and I don't want to say that college students enter the campus not ready, but there is a transformation that happens for most people on the college campus. There's a lot of studies that show that the college campus is truly the time in someone's life where they determine who they are going to be. So it feels like a critical moment, and my hope is that everybody who graduates the college campus in San Francisco, Hillel in particular, commits not just to what their Jewish engagement is going to be like in the world, but in exactly how we started this conversation and how their Jewish values are going to inform the work they do and the person they're going to be.
First of all, retweet to Rachel's leadership. I'm proud to know her and just really in awe of the work that she's been able to do at SF Hillel. So agree that that should be enough. And, you know, Hillel's mission is about reaching every Jewish student so that they may enrich the Jewish community in the world. It's an audacious and yet very simple goal. And to invest in places like SF Hillel and in this next generation is to align oneself with the idea that this generation is going to enrich the Jewish community in the world. Full stop. And they're going to do it whether we invest in them or not. So the question is, do we want to be a part of nurturing and catalyzing that impact? Or do we want to be sitting on the sidelines while they crush it in front of our faces? I want to be a part of that story, right? Like, I want to be a part of catalyzing their efforts in this world. And I love that Manny brought up this like Passover analogy a little bit. What came to mind for me is this language that we all see ourselves as having left Egypt, that we say in the Seder, right? The microcosm that she was talking about of the real world playing out on a college campus or in a university context. This is the opportunity where students say, I see myself as a part of generational impact, generational activism. We don't just care about these causes because we're Jews. We care about these causes because they impact Jews. Racial justice impacts Jews. Gender equity impacts Jews. Poverty impacts Jews. And if we care about any of those things, then we care about Jews playing a role in addressing those issues and Jews caring for their own in those meaningful ways. So for me, it's very clear. An investment in this community and in this generation is a catalyzing effort because they're already well on their way to creating the impact. And I would love for all of us to be a part of that compelling story.
If you're a donor, listen to Danielle, okay? Listen to her. Listen to Danielle. Read my lips. Listen to her.
Yeah, and as a product of SF Hillel, I've been involved since my first year on campus. Similar to what Sheila said, I didn't have the words to explain who I was or how I felt about who I was until I started getting involved and reading theory and participating in activism. So yeah, thank you, SF Hillel. Thank you so much, Rachel, and all of the amazing staff. And Manny, Sheila, and Danielle, thank you so much for talking to me today. I feel even more excited about the Jewish future than I usually do. So thank you.
What a great moderator and facilitator. And don't let anyone tell you you're an up and coming leader. You are already a leader.
That's right. Way to crush it. And thank you for having us. This was such a pleasure.
Thanks so much, everyone.